Epik Mellon podcast, conversations with the real humans behind broadband networks, cybersecurity, and the future of communications. Brought to you by QA Cafe. Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of the Epik Mellon podcast. I am your host, Jason Walls, and I am here with Wouter from the Purple Foundation. And you've probably heard me talk about Purple a lot on this show, talking about the inner workings of broadband gateways and the whole reason why we have jobs and why we're even here. But I'm really glad to have him on today, and I apologize for the break. I didn't do an episode 2 weeks ago because I was on vacation, and I thought I would take a necessary break. I was taking my daughter to swim class every single day, so we basically hung out at the pool all week. It was pretty great. As usual, this podcast is brought to you by my employers at QA Cafe, and as such, the views expressed by myself or Wouter do not reflect those of QA Cafe or its ownership, and the same goes with the Purple Foundation, even though I could switch several hats and be like, oh, am I talking for the Purple Foundation? We all have our tentacles and everything. And it is brought to you by our three great products at QA Cafe, including CD Router, the industry standard test platform for broadband gateways, Wi-Fi devices, and other customer premises equipment, and also the official certification tool of the Purpleware certification, of which the first one just came out last week. It was very exciting. We'll talk about that and my general skepticism about certification programs and how ecstatic I am when they actually work out. But our second product is CloudShark Enterprise, which is the way for you to deploy packet analysis across your entire global organization in an easy way that lets you scale with as many different things as you need in any use case that you need, and make sure that you have standard operating procedures around packet capture analysis. And it does a lot of other cool things that we're going to release soon, actually, including the new deep search, which lets you use a Wireshark filter and apply it to any number of packet capture files to see if you get hits on things that might match that filter. It's extraordinarily powerful. And the last is Packet Viewer, which is the power behind CloudShark, and lets you drop web-based packet analysis into your own platform and your own application really easy. All right. Anyway, how are you? Welcome back. I just saw Wouter at Broadband Forum 2 weeks ago. And was it like 3 weeks ago now? I don't know what time is. Two and a half. Two is about 5. And it was a good time. It was a good time. We were in Munich, and as you can expect, it was, we have fun at these things because we're nerds, but it's also fun to go hang out too. We talked about a lot of nerdy things too. Like we dove all the way down into sci-fi publishing and so Wouter knows an awful lot about an awful lot of things, and all of those things. So the running story I always have on this show, right, is that we get into this stuff by accident, right? It's like we intend certain things, even if you're going down the engineering route. You never really intend to get into this industry. And it's usually like a collection of things that all come together. So I don't know if the story is the same with you, but I am interested in hearing that story about how you even got to be doing this.
No, speak for yourself. I'm a man on a mission. I had a plan.
I always love these little boxes.
Yeah. Okay. I did this bit in a bit more detail in the webinar that I did for Purple, but I'll try to condense it a little bit. So I've been programming since a very long age, fascinated by technology, got into the networking part when I first got a modem in 92, 93 or so, then got internet access in 95. Started to dig into TCP/IP and all of those other things, and did all the other networking stuff. Fell into working in the open source community. The first open source community I engaged with actively was the Apache SOAP project at the time.
Oh, no way.
And when
so it's your fault.
Yeah, so we were going to do enterprise Java beans in those days because that's what our product was. And our chief architect decided that, well, there's this new thing that Microsoft brought in, which is this SOAP, and we should switch our entire architecture to that. Which, I learned as an architect is that the last thing you want to do is derail your project by jumping on the latest hype of an unfinished technology. So I jumped into that and improved that, stabilized that, added
Oh,
a
okay,
bunch of
good.
engaged with the Apache community, worked weekends and evenings to get this thing
Wait, so you're
up and
saying
running.
SOAP was worse? I'm kidding.
So that's where that's why I came to the conclusion that SOAP was terrible. It is not simple. It is not object oriented. I don't know don't know what the axis is supposed to stand for, and it's not really a protocol. It's just an encapsulation.
Isn't it funny how like every single protocol that's out there that named itself simple was not SNMP?
So after that, I went to contract for an open source consultancy company that was doing specifically embedded, and that's what. So I was sold on the open source thing. My mentality always, in any case. So I was happy to see the open source community, Linux, etc., as well develop. I was excited to be part of an open source community actively, and then becoming an open source consultant, bringing embedded solutions to with Linux and specific Linux and the name slips my mind. ECOS. That's it. So real-time operating system. To customers and to real products in the field, tangible products that had me hooked. I had done some embedded stuff in my high school days as well, paying for my hobby, my nerdy hobby.
Yeah.
And so I was all for that, and really got in deep. One of my projects that I worked for on 3 years was a satellite modem. Actually, I made the first two-way satellite modem.
No way.
It was usually in downstream DVB and in ups or something like that, and in upstream you would have to have a telephony connection, and you had a modem in your device, and that would dial up. So we did a two-way satellite modem, and I developed the whole software stack, the whole Linux stack, specifically for a gateway, all by myself, all with the TCP/IP knowledge and etc. that I had. They laughed at me when I suggested that we should do IPv6 as well. But this was 2006, so yeah. So that I really enjoyed. So satellite technology is super sexy. That's when I really thought that. Now I know why I studied all that mathematics and engineering, because I needed it. All of a sudden, I had to go. I went to look up for all my old course material on mathematics, and then came to the conclusion: well, we have Wikipedia nowadays. I can just look it up, how to work out a series or something like that, or to come up or write a random number generator or something like that. So then, what I noticed is that doing one project after another within customers, even though I had the job as an architect, which I had the experience from since the 90s already, I had hit this glass ceiling as a consultant, and I never managed to get all the way up to the next level. So I figured the only way I'm going to change things and really bring open source mentality into the corporate world is from the inside. So what I should do is just join some sort of a company. At that point in time, Orange, which was still called France Telecom, Technical, or now Vantiva, which was still called Thomson Telecom.
Oh yeah.
And Sagemcom, which was still the Sagem group, started a joint venture called Soft at Home. And I became the chief architect of the gateway in there. And that's where I really figured that I'm going to bring this open source mentality in there, maybe work with the OpenWRT world. Fast forward 10 years, and I had developed a very, very comprehensive, entirely proprietary software stack, thinking, what have I done? So I tried from the inside, didn't really succeed, and then did a couple of rounds working for operators, going in the RDKB world, trying to see that, well, if it's operator funded, then it makes a lot more sense, actually. You want the operators to be the ones who push the vendors to say, this is how we need to do it, and it has to be open source, and it has to be aligned with the community.
Right.
And I thought I found that in the RDKB world. I then went to Deutsche Telekom, set up a whole development organization there to be based on RDKB, but with all of the layers being the prpl, which we in the meantime in Soft.Film we got into, and I kept following up, especially the low-level API bits. And then ultimately ended up joining prpl full-time after the operators had sort of taken charge, in which they were driving the direction and saying, we want to deploy a deployable, fully open source stack out there. So I'm home. I'm actually now doing what I set out to do a decade and a half ago.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It's and I've talked about this before, where it's like, it is true where I, like, every now and then somebody will be like, oh, you're really lucky, to have gotten to where you are. And then looking back, and it's like, wait, no, there were very specific steps that I took to purposefully. I might not have known it at the time, but they were still very, like, willing things, conscious things.
Yeah, sometimes due to the day-to-day and all the business and everything that you need to do, you lose track of what your vision in life was. So from time to time, you need to take a step back and go, why am I doing this again?
Mm-hmm. No, it's true. And for me, because, I went back and forth with, liking school and not liking school, and liking computer science and not liking computer science for a number of reasons, and it's like, when it comes to networking, it's when you said the thing about being fascinated about it since you got your first modem, it's like, that did happen to me, right? I didn't have the other pieces in place in my life to realize how much I actually do love it, but that moment happened to me. Watching a modem like complete its sequence and seeing the symbols go by, I was like, why do I love this so much? Right? And then from there, but I never would have known, if it wasn't for working at UNH IOL, I never would have considered doing it. But once I did, I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So my first modem was before the internet was publicly available definitely in both as a solution. So I dialed into BBSs,
Me
then
too, yeah.
got hooked into FidoNet, which did routing of I would say mailing lists and personal mail just by hop. So it could take 3 days before your mail went to the other side, because it was really the voluntary pairing between different BBS operators that would dial out and in batch, highly compressed as efficiently as possible, because in those days every second was getting cost money. Would forward that, and then those with more money would do international calls, which were super expensive to do those things. Yeah, it was fascinating. So I fell in with the BBS crowd. I know, because what I could do is that if I wanted to chat in person with the BBS operator, I just unhook my handset and dial the modem, and I was able to whistle 2 different types of connects. So
wow.
The guy figured that
Captain crunching it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of a connect that doesn't normally happen. There's no modem nowadays that syncs at that rate. So it's water calling.
That's awesome. See, I genuinely miss how hacky it was, right? And there's a lot of things that I never would have learned if it wasn't so hacky, ironically, right? Like, if everything just sort of worked, then there's all sorts of things that I never would have learned, and would have,
Yes.
would have prevented me from going any further,
Yeah, I'm sorry for the younger generations. They miss the joy of just the sheer joy of doing something completely new based on simple technology that you could fully understand.
Right. Without the ability to look it up either.
and without the internet, you had to invent everything over and over again. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is not a kids these days argument. We're just No, but interestingly enough, about the whole kids these days thing is like when you were talking about the fact that when you were basically almost a preteen wanting to do this stuff, what we used to do at the IOL when Lincoln and I were trying to hire somebody is we would ask them specifically, tell me a project that you've done on your own that has nothing to do with school or work that you just couldn't help but do it and finish it. And those were the kids we ended up hiring because it's the one, if you have the bug, right?
So I've done maybe 200 job interviews, and I was looking for people who loved technology. The most outrageous and fantastic job interview I ever did was a guy who had done the hardware for a gateway for an Italian guy for Telecom Italia, I think, in the day. And so he was sitting there in my office next to the guy from the consultancy company I was trying to push him onto us. And at some point in time, we were talking. So what I always ask, tell me about your previous projects. I go through the history and I go, tell me about this, tell me about this. And when I see a sparkle in the eyes and I see somebody trying to explain, and I did this, and then I designed it in that way. And so that's how I go, this person is the sort of person I want. This guy was jumping around the office, opened this bag, took out a PCB and went, look, and I wrote it like this and this and this. The guy from the consultancy, the two of us just really nerding out over how did you do this and that, and the guy from the consultancy company going, I have never seen anything. What is happening here?
Right. Yeah, no, it's to get weird and mythological for a second. It's like there's a reason why the term genius and genie and demon are all the same, right? It's like at that point when you see somebody in that space, like they're channeling something that's almost not even them, right? Like it's like it's like this huge amount of energy that comes out of nowhere, and and it feels great, and it only happens when you are actually that passionate about something.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, I can. So just last week, I walked around with a few people who introduced me to other people, and completely outside of the industry, the whole small talk thing. I just stand there and go, what do I do now? What do I say now? Put me in front of another nerd, and I light up, and the stories come out, right?
Yeah.
No, I always say that. So we all have our own cultures and in our own countries and our own language, but being a nerd, that's a global culture of our own.
Right. And what's interesting is that because we're pretty close generationally. I'm like the youngest. I was not born in 1979, so I'm like the youngest of Generation X. Right. I'm in the weird microculture. The Oregon Trail generation is what we call it. Right. And so,
people would call you millennial, but I take it that you would take that as an insult.
Well, right, because we're not, basically like all of my cousins are Gen X, but we're all the same generation.
How can you be 25 years younger than I and call yourself Gen X?
It's like it is. It really is like a micro generation. And I say that because, we sort of experience the transition a little bit differently. And for me, in terms of nerd culture, right? Like when we grew up, it was basically like being a nerd was the counterculture, right? It was the underground thing. And I always talk about Dungeons and Dragons because now it's so mainstream that it's bizarre, right? And then I'm like, wait a minute. No, nerds actually won the culture war because look at what happened. You had Lord of the Rings, an 11 Oscar winning movie. You had Harry Potter come to the big screen, which was already a global phenomenon. And you had everything after that, right? that would suddenly open the door for all the media and content we have right now. And I'm like, wait a minute, how did we win the culture war? I'm like, oh right, I forgot. In every single movie from like 1975 until now, the non-nerds were the bad guys. The nerds were the good guys. And so like it was basically like beaten into our culture this whole time.
True. There's also the aspect that I also noticed is that I was always laughed at and bullied for being a nerd, certainly in primary school.
Oh yeah.
And then at some point in time, when computers made their entry, and more and more people started using computers, all of a sudden we got popular. Can you help me with this?
Oh yeah.
Can you get a copy of our homework so I don't have to do
What's that? Is that the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer lesson where it's like your differences will be accepted if they're useful?
in a way, yes. Yeah, and fast forward another 10 years, and we're in 2010 or so. Smartphones come out, social media takes off. Yeah, and then the nerds were the trailblazers. We were there first, and all of that stuff is suddenly cool.
Yeah.
And now I regret now we have to regret that kids don't play outside anymore and just stare at their screens.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be some.
We're like, we did this. No. What have we done? Yeah, no, it frustrates me. I'm kind of glad you do see the difference. That just as a quick side tangent, you do see the difference, though, because my daughter is my 5-year-old is at like a forest camp this week, right? It's like 6 hours a day, and when you're that little, there's not a lot of options we have to be able to send her somewhere, right? And so it's either sit around with us when we're trying to do work, which means she's going to be on the iPad, right? Because she's effectively an only child, or we play with her, right? Because walking around neighborhoods is a thing of the past, and you have to organize play dates and all sort of bullshit that we have to do now, right? So like watching her this week being outside for 6 hours a day, it's a total mental transformation, right? And so I think about that all the time. I'm like, ugh, like, I don't know. But anyway, you can never see the consequences, and it's hard to judge what's one thing is good and one thing's not. One thing I did want to talk about, though, so it's as a result of this, like you have actually seen the entire transformation of what our internet connections are and what broadband gateways are, right? From the beginning.
I saw the entire story from a completely analog world to a completely digital world.
Yeah, right. But not even just from the general technology, but specifically, the stuff that we work with, right? So like you've seen the transformation from, and I apologize for repeating myself on almost every show, but we talk about how internet access was consumer first, right? Like you were talking about the paying for the minutes thing, right? It's like the telcos didn't care at all about the existence of these of BBSs and the rudimentary internet like Prodigy and America Online and all those things. They didn't care. People were making phone calls and they were making money. Like they had nothing to do with it whatsoever.
And then they started setting up their own dial-in points and started to scale that up, and then DSL came out, and or ISDN and DSL started to come out.
Right.
Things started to accelerate, yeah.
Right. And DOCSIS too, where like, if you talk to a lot of DOCSIS people, they're like, they equate the term broadband with DOCSIS, right? Like they invented it, but like it happens a lot.
That's a bit unfair, right? So DOCSIS was third here in Belgium after ISDN and first PSTN, of course, and then dial-up points, then ISDN, then DSL, and then DOCSIS came here in a big way here, especially here.
DOCSIS is cable for those of you who don't know what we're talking about. Cable broadband. But yeah, so you've seen the evolution of the gateway too, right? Because, initially it wasn't a thing, right? Initially, like I remember with early cable broadband, you were just literally plugging your NIC into the wall, right?
Yeah.
And they took care of everything else. There There was no routing point that was there. There was no barrier to entry until it started, and it was all retail, right?
Retail or operator provided in the early days already.
Right.
Depending on the country and the region,
Yeah. And the transformation of Wi-Fi too. Like you've seen that whole transition, which is also a consumer first technology.
Transformation, I mean, there was no wireless communication.
Yeah. No, but
you could actually do dial-up, 2G dial-up to a modem point of presence over a regular 2G line, cellular as well. That's the closest to to wireless or cordless that we had.
Yeah.
In the 90s.
Yeah. No, I say transition because early on, well, again, it was consumer technology mostly, right? Like this was something that people were buying versus now where it's basically the critical infrastructure of internet connectivity for most people and the way they understand connecting to the internet, right? And so
yes.
Operators are now, it's so weird to me because this thing, and you still have holdouts of people who, I don't want to say thinking the old way, but because the point is valid that, where does ownership of the network stop from the operator, right? To where the consumer owns it, right? And who's in charge of what, and who's responsible for what, and who's responsible for making it work and all that. That's changed, right?
Yes, and I went through that transformation when joining Soft at Home and deploying gateways in Orange and in other operators. And at the end of the day, so the biggest driver there was how do we reduce customer calls to our help desk, because that's expensive. And that automatically leads to trying to find more telemetry, do more stability of the device, trying to figure out where a problem is and being able to do problem determination remotely. All of those things are fundamental. And actually, I think that's a good driver. Eh? I mean, a system always has to be designed in such a way that it leads to good outcomes based on how do you measure what success is and what is failure. If your customers are happy, if that's your because it reduces your cost of customers calling your help desk, that's a good incentive.
Right.
That makes operators and vendors make their products better.
Right.
I think that works well.
It's interesting, though, that not all the use cases are the same, because I love that story you were telling me at lunch about how it's like, yes, theoretically, all operators want to reduce help desk calls and save money on that, except in a couple of areas, right? Where it turns out that the calling the physical person was actually what the customers found valuable.
Yes, so you cannot automatically transplant these incentives and assume that the same is true everywhere. You need to understand every region. So this was specifically for a country in former Eastern Europe, where it was cheap actually to hire people, and therefore you had well manned help desks. And people don't interact with their gateways. They just call the help desk.
Which they shouldn't do now anyway, by the way.
Can you change my password? Can you change my SSID? Which seems insane to us. But for them, having that personal customer service and customer service willing to do all of these things for them is relevant. And it's partly a cultural thing, and that possibly driven by economic factors.
Right.
Those things need to be taken into account. I find that fascinating because I've known in Deutsche Telekom, I worked with 11 different country operators. In Liberty Global, I can't remember the number it was. It changed as I was there, so it's a confusion. Soft at Home was maybe 5 or 6 different operators across different countries as well. Now in Purple, it's a whole bunch of operators from different regions as well. So I find it fascinating just to see what drives and what is relevant in their particular market. And there's always some sort of a cultural or an economic and a historical thing behind it.
Yeah,
I find it very fascinating.
No, it's that one story was kind of incredibly fascinating to me because we do generally tell one story, especially when we're developing technology that is fulfilling a particular solution, right? We're like, oh, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and you should definitely do it this way. But it turns out that, what matters is like, that's exactly what you were saying before about adopting the latest technology without thinking about it, right? Yeah. It's like the bottom line. The bottom line of most companies is exactly what you said. It's like, no, well, I mean, what we're doing is working and making us money. So explain to me why exactly we should.
Yeah, you should. Well, you should have the. So this is the interesting thing. So um, in the early days of my career, I did multiple things. After a few months or at least or maximum 3 years, I was bored with what I was doing, and then I asked for a transfer internally in the company or started doing something completely different. I did server support for disk solutions and that sort of thing. I worked on mainframe software. I did all sorts of different things, and I think that's essential in your early career that you become an expert in every one of those domains, and then you get bored and you say, I don't want to get stuck into this for the rest of my life. I want to go and do something else, and that broadens your horizon, and that gives you more insight in general in technology because you've seen these different aspects. And we're talking now about the technology, but that previous story is about where I say that it's fascinating to see these different cultural and economic aspects. It's the same thing. It's having a wider understanding of something and having a better vision of how you need to organize things based on varied, diverse experiences. So that you say, well, if you change the parameters here and here and here and here, and that's how you understand the motivations in a system. That's true for technology. That is true for how you set up development organizations. Probably QA organizations haven't been too involved in that either. And it's true in how you interact as a business with your customers.
Yeah. Right.
A broader horizon gives you more insights and in general.
Right, and it kind of insulates you a little bit from like the don't know what you don't know, right? Like, the quadrant where it's like, which is the worst one is the things that you don't even know that you don't know, right? And doing that sort of diversification ahead of time kind of insulates you from that.
Yes, the more you know, the more humble you should be about the things you don't know. Yes.
Yeah, 100%.
Being arrogant and say that I know everything about this particular domain is the more you know that you don't know. That is general philosophical principle.
Yeah. Thanks, Socrates. That's an original, although not really an original because we don't know anything that Socrates said. It was all Plato saying what Socrates said. Where it's like, did he even exist? I don't know. Anyway, I have a philosophy degree, by the way. I don't know if you know that.
You mentioned that, didn't you?
Yeah. It was actually one I would never regret it, not for a minute. It was one of the best times of my life, and has helped me in so many ways. I really look back and be like, well, that's exactly what we're talking about. Nothing by accident, right?
Yeah. But most of the things I've learned on the job or by doing them out of love. And I would say that the same thing for philosophy. I learned philosophy by living a life.
Right. It is. Philosophy is ironically pragmatic. For those of you who don't think it is, we don't just sit around asking questions. What was that? Oh, speaking of which, the sci-fi stuff, because we got talking because you've been writing some books, or in the process of writing them, right? And you were
No, not really. So I wanted to be a novelist. I read nonstop when I was a child, and I wanted to be a novelist. I fell in love with the sci-fi genre. I figured I'll be a sci-fi novelist. And then figured that writing's actually hard. Difficult to make a career out of this, and this computer thing seems to be taking off as well, so maybe I should focus on that. And now, being older, I regret that I loved writing. I wish I could would do that. So maybe at some point in time after I retire, I have some ideas of what I could do if I could jump back into that. Perhaps I don't know.
Yeah.
It feels sometimes that I've lost the spark and I've lost the ability to use language in the way that I could do when I was younger. Just 30 years of corporate lingo has knocked poetry out of me a bit.
Does it? I don't know. I don't want it to say that it crushes your spirit, but it kind of does. And I always feel fortunate because I've always worked for very small companies, So I always wonder, like, I'm actually afraid to go into that environment because I just don't want it to crush the life out of me. But you can end up finding these niches, which, is kind of what we do. But I'm always afraid of that for sure. One thing I was going to ask you about that. You're saying you were introducing the open source concept to sort of the corporate world. And I'm very curious about how that went, because I have a feeling, because there's been an evolution of how the open source community is too, right? And early on, it was much more hacky and ragtag and, back when it was cool, right? It's very hipster, right? It's like before something's cool, it was better. And, but I'm curious what that sort of, the evolution of that pushback was, right? If any, and if people eventually finally got it, or if it got assimilated,
So I was lucky in a way that my first the first company I worked for full time was IBM from '95 to 2001, because IBM was one of the first companies to get it. They really
ironically,
in the late '90s, yeah, they really in the late '90s figured that this thing. We don't need to fight this thing. We need to ride this wave. They really got it. Which is how I also got in contact with IBM Research, and who were engaged in some of the open source parts. And SOAP, I guess, was more of Apache, but there was a general agreement within IBM that we needed to engage with the open source community. So I thought that was great. I also started I was doing server support and customer support for second level, and I brought in that, like, why don't we support Linux as well? No problem, let's do that too. We have customers who want to install Linux on our servers. Let them do our calls as well, next to Unixware and Solaris and AIX and that sort of thing. Sure, let's do that too.
That's cool. So they got it. They got it early.
They got it, yeah. And it's and IBM was, at least in those days, was not one monolith at all. So I really liked the way that was structured internally. You had like 10,000. It was really in the order of magnitude of 10,000 different departments, and 10,000 different departments that each on their own set their own goals, did their own things. Had an internal economy with what they called blue dollars. So you could charge from one department to another with internal money, which was a fraction of what a US dollar was. So it was cheaper to subcontract to another department than from an external vendor, for example. And at first you go, this is so inefficient. We're sometimes competing against each other, trying to develop different solutions in the same market. Why would we do that? Why doesn't management say this is the way you need to do it? And that's when it hit me that that doesn't work, right? For the same reason the free market economy works much better than a central planning economy is that let's have this inefficiency. Let's have the spirit of competition. Let's have failures and somebody else picking up, and whatever comes out of that is a nugget of gold that we can sell. Usually the margins were so great that that all of that inefficiency was worth it.
Right.
So it's actually exactly the way you want to do it as a big company.
No, you have to. You're right. It's exactly the knowledge problem. It's like you're basically just trying. The science behind any adaptive system is basically the same, right? And it's like you need to find the perfect balance of flexibility and structure. And the way you do that is by allowing it to manifest organically, like life.
It's common-based game of life where you, in a way where you program what are the parameters, what can you do, how do you interact with others, and then go and let's see what works, what wins out in the end. It's evolution, it's life, yeah, absolutely. So that led to really a lot of freedom in different departments. So it was really easy for me in my department that I worked in to say, let's do this open source thing. That's cool. Let's jump onto that. Nobody in corporate said, no, you're not allowed to do that, because they just let it play out until it became so clear from so many hundreds of departments that said, we've adopted open source things, we've engaged with the open source community, we've open sourced code, that corporate at some point in time just realized that, well, this is a thing, this works. Our customers seem to be okay with it, let's do that.
Now, has that been the same attitude when it comes to open source gateways? Like when the whole thing began and to now?
No. So that was a bit harder that's a bit difficult. So you have a lot of different vendors who are competing against each other. They'll adopt open source, obviously. They're practically all based on Linux, and they are now. And they started pulling in things like host APD, those projects they would gladly use. Then a huge amount that base themselves on OpenWRT, usually without giving anything back to the community. There are a couple of exceptions there. But open sourcing their own stack, that's difficult if you're a small vendor, that's difficult to sell, right? As in, what's going to stop others from using this? What do we win here, etc. And my mentality was always that, well, this is going to happen sooner or later. Sooner or later, someone's going to make an open source stack and it's going to eat your lunch. So the idea of charging license fees for this doesn't really make any sense. Go for a model where you have an established relationship as a system integrator with a number of operators. Make sure you have a trust relationship with you, that they understand that you have the knowledge and the expertise, and they wouldn't want to switch that to it, and the understanding of what that customer needs, and work based on a feature development, on device development basis, and on a maintenance and support basis. You can absolutely live that way. You don't need to. Mostly the operators don't care what kind of a stack. At least now they care. Now it's alive. And the last few years that the operators really know what that market is like, and they're looking at it in a different way. But until a few years ago, the operator doesn't care what runs on the system. It just has to be delivered and it has to work.
Right. Yeah.
So if a vendor were to say that I'm using an open source stack and pulling in these bits from one of my competitors, but I'm also open sourcing things that my competitors go, then you get the idea of the rising tide or standing on the shoulders of giants. Huh? Like the same thing. I was in that world still that there were lots and lots and lots of little real different operating systems, and especially real-time operating systems, small things. And at some point in time, just Linux wiped everything out because it had the momentum and the support into it in it. At some point in time, where you go, it doesn't make any sense to do anything else anymore. I'm just still waiting for Microsoft to switch to Linux kernel at some point in time.
I mean, there are baby steps. There's baby steps in there, like.
There are a bunch of baby steps, right? So it's completely conceivable to me that this would happen, and it has to be the same in the gateway world. We have two open source stacks. If you don't count OpenWRT, which is far from what most operators would want to deploy, not all of them. I had a conversation with one of them today who said, "Why do we need TR181? We can just SSH into the box and run a command on it." If we want to do remote management or reconfiguration.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, you can, right? Again, there's no one solution for all. But generally, the whole model of a microservice architecture with a bus, with a TR181 data model as a high-level API, especially now that we have this logic of the apps coming in, etc. It's clearly becoming something between the RDKB and prpl mostly. It's good that there are two. The view, the way one of our operators describes that is that you ultimately you ultimately ends up with all of these competition of these little players. Ultimately, two or three players come out, and then there's the example. There's Android, and there's iOS, right?
Yeah.
Or there's Windows, and there's Mac OS, and Linux. You have a few which have enough momentum and impetus, and everybody falls into one of those, or even both of them, and supports that you create a healthy ecosystem for application developers and for hardware manufacturers who need to have a stack, for system integrators, for operators to say we're going to pick one or the other. So what we're seeing is not new. It has happened in the open source world.
And it's kind of, I was thinking about this the other day. It was kind of a shower thought that I was having, was there is this inevitability, right? I was thinking about interoperability and standardization and all this, and it's like there is this inevitability of it, right? And you can, if you do it sooner rather than later, you will be better off generally, unless you are the kind of company that I won't name names, but you might guess who I'm talking about, who decides to do it in a proprietary way and then takes all their money and runs, right? When they're faced with the inevitability of standardization.
This is how the evolution of technology and the economy and companies teaches us that over the last couple of 100 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you see some new business or some new technology popping up that is a fundamental risk to your business, don't fight them, invest in it. Right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so none of this is particularly new. I'm sorry, did you say you have a shower thought? I'm going to take away your nerd card. You take showers?
And sometimes luxurious baths. No. That was fair. That was fair. Sometimes no. Sometimes it just turns into, it's too hot outside and I need to water the plants. So Sush and I just spray each other with the hose. It's like, whatever. My favorite example of what we were just talking about is Napster, right? It's like the prime example, because what happened, what happened, right? Everybody was fighting it. Everyone was fighting it. And then you start to until it takes somebody to look at it and be like, wait a minute, this is happening because people want it. What if we gave it to them very easily, and then Apple was like, why don't we just have people buy songs for $1? And Napster went under. As soon as the iTunes store came out, like the amount of people stealing music went. It was incredible.
So, but that, and then we have streaming services going the other way around. In the wrong direction. Yeah. So this is clearly this is going to get fixed in some sort of a way by the industry as well. Somebody's going to figure out that not offering the guy, what's his name? The guy who started Mega, guy from New Zealand. I come to his name. He got into trouble with the FBI, even though he was in New Zealand. Very strange. So, but he also said that this could be very simple. If Disney wants to completely take the market, they would just create a streaming service. Or no, sorry, if Hollywood wants to take the entire market, they would just put all of their content online for streaming for a service at a reasonable fee. Everybody will buy that. Everybody.
Yeah.
So this whole business of this show is now on this streaming channel, and we're no longer.
It's all clinging. They're all still clinging.
And the rest of Rick and Morty is no longer on Netflix, but it's now on HBO. So somebody has to switch. That it's not sustainable. That is going to break soon.
Yeah. No, it's totally true. And I mean, they should take the lesson from music, because look at Spotify, right?
Yeah.
Like, look at Spotify. Like Spotify and Google Music, yes, they're two competing ones, but they all have everything, right? They're not like beholden to the different record labels in some weird way. It's not, and the record labels don't, you know.
So it's different for the music industry is a bit different than the movie and TV series industry, right? In the sense that they're still stuck in this mentality of we're going to launch it on that date with exclusivity in that channel in that region, etc.
Right. Right.
No, forget it. Launch worldwide on day one and give it to everyone.
Yeah.
That story is just gone. And I know that there is a lot of business history and etc. in there, and the different competition between the different networks in the different countries. But that's just going to go.
Oh, it's all still cultural too. What was that? There was an article that came out the other day, and I don't know if it was just U.S. data, might have been, where streaming overcame broadcast for the first time. Like it was more than 50% for the first time ever, and it's like, what? Like
Only now?
Yeah.
Really?
That's how hard it, like, well, I think a lot of it is, but a lot of it is cultural, right? A lot of it is there is a huge generation of people that is still the way that they expect to consume television, right? It's just a weird anecdote. There's one of my favorite books called Alchemy. It's by the guy who opened Ogilvy, the biggest ad agency in the world. It's basically like a behavioral science book, but he has all of these cool examples about how you have to solve the cultural problem first before you can actually deliver a product. And it was about the Walkman and how the concept of walking around with headphones on and listening to music was not a thing. Like there was not something that people would process in their brains. And so to make sure that it was extraordinarily clear that this is what the Walkman was for, they did not put a recording function in it, even though they easily could have, and it would cost nothing. Because then people were like, oh, well, what is this? Is it a dictation machine? Oh, it's kind of like a recording cassette player, blah, blah, blah. Right? He's like, no, this is a Walkman. You walk around and you listen to music.
We were already walking around with player, and now it's just that let's put headphones on instead, so you're not bothering everybody else.
Right. Oh man, it's cool. I love what we do. I really do. All right, cool.
And we're not done.
No, we're not. I look forward to that, especially with, we're going to see all that happening. We don't have to go down the entire route. We could do an entire other show about RDK and Purple and where things are, but we don't have to do that here. This is about people. This show is about people. But yeah, no, thanks for coming on. I'd always wanted you on, but then after we sat down and really kind of talked at the last meeting, I was like, I really need to get Wouter on. It was fun. But yeah, so please, all the usual stuff, please do hit like on this. I know I know it sounds cliche, but it turns out like it really does help everything for you to just hit that button, and especially subscribing, right? It's like, and obviously I have the audio channels too. So if you are listening to this without video and you don't get to see what we look like, and you don't get to see Wouter's awesome Ailstorm t-shirt, which, by the way, pirate metal is probably one of the greatest micro genres that has ever come out of art. It's like pirate metal and dwarf metal is like if you're just listening on audio, please do subscribe there too. It really helps all these things. And if you have any questions for Wouter or myself, drop it in the comments. And we love to talk about those things. And I'm sure we'll talk about this stuff more in the future. But above all, and I really like that we talked about this a lot in this particular show, is the mantra at the end of the show that I had been doing since the beginning is own the nerdy things that you love and have fun doing them. Thanks, Wouter.